For better and for worse, Outward feels like a long-lost MMORPG from the early 2000s. It has the magic of going on adventures with your friends nearby and far in this gigantic fantasy world. It's a game that throws you into a foreign world and lets you sort of just figure it out yourself. We're skipping the story section for this review because Outward doesn't really have a traditional RPG story. Rather than telling you a story about how you play as a hero that has to save the day, you're more of an NPC character. You're but just another person in this fantasy world, and while you do get quests regarding the factions in the world, ultimately this game is just about you living in it. In that sense, Outward feels like a classic RPG, the love child of something like Skyrim, Morrowind, and even a little bit of vanilla World of Warcraft. It's definitely not a game for everyone. From the very start of the adventure, you're thrust into the world without any real context. Outward doesn't hold your hand at all, and so the first few hours of your playtime are going to be learning how everything works. It takes some time to get used to, and that's because Outward is built around the idea of figuring things out. It's woven into every part of its gameplay. For example, there isn't a minimap with quest markers, something that pretty much every modern RPG has on screen. For Outward, you're given a general map of the world, and using major landmarks, you'll learn your location and traverse everything. You're really pushed to manually walk to every location rather than just fast travel from quest to quest. It feels dated in some sense, but it's done on purpose. You see, the world is built with survival in mind. You can die from harsh weather, eating raw food, or even just not sleeping. It really takes the survival mechanic seriously. Being just any other NPC in this world, you're not special. You don't have absurd strength or unique powers, you're just another random adventurer in the village, and so it's up to you to handle all these hurdles. It makes for a great challenge in the first few hours of the game as you learn to deal with everything, but I can also see it being a turnoff for anyone not used to more classic RPGs. What's particularly cool about the design choices in this game is that it really throws back to a time where online MMORPGs were a completely new thing. The addition of an online co-op mode and even a local split-screen mode only help flourish that more. It's incredibly easy to just set up a world and invite friends over to play. However, it's also easy to take advantage of the online co-op and have a friend that's better equipped than you sort of make things easier for you. If you co-op from the get-go with a friend, it really does change the experience, and I'll even say for the better. There's something fun about just coordinating a time with a friend to go adventuring with. It's like the modern appeal of playing a looter shooter with a squad without all the microtransactions and the pain that come with them, because the world here is already so big. Having a big world to explore means that you should have things to explore through, and for the most part, Outward does have some. There are dungeons and factions to explore, enemies to fight, but they sadly aren't entirely interesting. Being a new game, I did find exploring dungeons interesting simply just because of curiosity, but most of the time I found myself just fighting enemies, and that's where some of the design fell apart for me. I'm not a big fan of how Outward's combat functions. Hitboxes don't seem consistent, and along with awkward attack animations, I often found myself dead in moments where I feel like I should have won a fight. In a game that's constantly saving so your actions are final and doesn't really let you die, you just sort of get transported to a nearby spawn scenario, it can get frustrating at times. Outside of using your traditional array of weapons, you can also cast magic to fight, but that's another large learning curve. Magic in Outward functions almost like a combo system where certain attacks build up to certain moves, rather than just hitting a hotkey to shoot a fireball. It's complex, and while it's tameable, it doesn't really help the already clumsy feeling of the combat, it just adds more complication to it. Outward has its moments of beauty and roughness throughout its gameplay. Playing on PC, I was able to pretty much max out at 1080p 60 on a GTX 1070. It doesn't feel taxing at all for my machine, and looking at the visuals, I can see why. The general overview of the game feels like an HD remaster of an early PS3 or 360 game. At the same time though, looking at the finite details of things like the foliage, they're much better looking. I didn't get a lot of time to play on the console versions of Outward, just mostly on PC, but I can confirm that both the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro offer higher resolutions and frame rates than the base models. In the end, Outward isn't the best looking RPG to be released this generation, but for a game that's aiming to recapture the tones of classic RPGs, I think it looks the part. Much like the visuals, the audio design and music were a mixed bag for me. Let's get the roughness out of the way first, the voice acting. NPCs in Outward just feel out of place. Listening to conversations between NPCs, they're never fully voiced. They'll voice the first sentence of a whole paragraph and then continue that trend for the next paragraph and so on. The quality of performances aren't that compelling either, but in a game where the story sort of takes a back burner, I'm not entirely surprised. What Outward does do well is create some great music that complements its fantasy world. The music uses a big selection of strings that create these whimsical sounding compositions that flow beautifully with the world. Ultimately, Outward felt to me like a classic online RPG from the early days of online gaming. That means it doesn't hold your hand, it's challenging, and can get rough around the edges, lending to the challenge and at times frustration. For a development studio consisting of about 10 people, it's an ambitious project and it really shows just how much dedication was put into the game. Presentation varies from great to just okay, ultimately really solidifying the feeling of this coming off as an indie Skyrim game. It's not fantastic, there are things that feel more frustrating than challenging despite the intent behind the implementation. With that in mind, I think there's no better way of describing this game than the 2019 RPG that purposely, for better and for worse, feels like a classic online RPG.